Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you all today at GreenGov 2016, and I want to start by thanking our White House neighbor, GW, for hosting this great event. I also want to congratulate this year's awardees who were recognized last night, and on behalf of the President, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do to help green up our government. The work that you're engaged in is very important, and by taking steps to ensure that the federal government and other organizations are leading on sustainability, you're not only having a direct positive effect on public health and our environment, you're providing proof each year that we can do more and that we can do better. You're providing leadership that inspires others to follow with their own sustainability efforts. My job at the White House is to help the President implement policies to cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in order to address the threat of climate change, which I think is the most all-encompassing sustainability challenge that we face. And when you look at what we've done over the last 8 years, it's clear that the President's leadership in taking action to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions has been essential to catalyzing global progress on this important issue. So I'm going to talk briefly about what we've been able to work on and accomplish during the administration on climate change and point to some of the work that remains to be done. This is an issue that the President's been working on really from the very beginning of his time in office. Within weeks of taking office, President Obama has set in motion 2 critical steps in the direction of cleaner energy sources and reduced emissions. First, he worked with Congress to enact the Recovery Act, which helped pull the economy out of the Great Recession and represented the biggest clean energy investment in our nation's history. $80 billion in funds for research, development, and deployment. This was transformational in many ways, but just to provide one example, the Recovery Act included the biggest single investment in renewables deployment in our history, helping to finance more than 100,000 renewable energy projects across the country with a combined capacity of 33 gigawatts, leveraging $90 billion of private, regional, and state investment. Second, the President directed EPA and the Department of Transportation to get to work updating fuel economy and greenhouse gas standards for our cars and trucks, something that hadn't happened in nearly 30 years. And during the first term, the administration completed several rounds of fuel economy and greenhouse standards for passenger vehicles and the first ever standards for larger vehicles like buses, garbage trucks, and 18-wheelers. At the start of the President's second term, he laid out a comprehensive climate change plan that included dozens of actions across the administration to continue to drive down U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. And we've been working to implement that plan ever since. I'll spare you the full list, but here are a few highlights. We've forged partnerships with industry to phase down HFCs. We've set standards to cut energy waste, deployed more renewable energy, helped secure the first ever global carbon standards for commercial aircraft, and taken steps to regulate emissions from the oil and gas sector. We've set another round of fuel economy standards for our heavy-duty vehicles, and we set the first ever national standards to cut greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector, the single biggest step this country has ever taken to reduce emissions, and which will cut power sector emissions by 30% from 2005 levels by 2030. The results of all this work is clear. At a time when the economy is growing, we're making steady progress in deploying clean energy and cutting emissions. Just a few examples. Since 2008, solar electricity generation has increased more than 30-fold, and electricity from wind generation has more than tripled. In 2014, for example, the U.S. brought online as much solar energy every 3 weeks as it did in all of 2008. Since the beginning of 2010, the average cost of a solar electric system has dropped by more than half, and all this is taking place while the solar industry is creating jobs 12 times faster than the rest of the economy. In the transportation sector, our standards are working. A recent technology review by the EPA and the DOT found that our automakers are bringing more efficient technologies to market even faster than was expected at the time that the standards were set in 2012. Taken together, these steps have helped drive U.S. carbon dioxide emissions for the first half of 2016 to their lowest levels in nearly 25 years. That progress in reducing U.S. emissions is important in its own right. But even more important is that U.S. leadership in reducing U.S. emissions has been essential to global efforts to tackle climate change. By showing that the U.S. is serious about taking on this issue, other countries have been willing to join, culminating in the historic agreement reached at COP21 in Paris last December, where American leadership helped mobilize nearly 200 nations around the world to put in place bold commitments to cut carbon emissions. That strategy continues to pay dividends. Just days ago, Presidents Obama and Xi acted together, yet again announcing that both countries joined the Paris Agreement, putting us closer to having the agreement enter into force this year. So what's left to do? Well, our first priority is to finish implementing the President's Climate Action Plan. That plan will impact U.S. emissions for years to come, and when fully implemented, will cut nearly 6 billion tons of carbon pollution through 2030. But there's even more that we can accomplish in the months ahead. For example, the Department of Interior is conducting a comprehensive review of the federal coal program to ensure a fair return to taxpayers and to take better account of climate change impacts. And looking abroad, as we focus on implementing the Paris Agreement, we have other opportunities as well. I mentioned HFCs and steps we've taken to reduce U.S. emissions. Next month, the world has a chance to make a major down payment on the Paris Agreement by amending the Montreal Protocol to phase down potent greenhouse gases, HFCs, a simple step that would cut global warming by up to 0.5 degrees centigrade over the next century. This is a step the administration and the President have been working on for several years. So to recap, it's clear looking back that U.S. leadership is absolutely essential to global progress on climate change. And while we've made good progress in the last 8 years, we've got a long way to go if we're going to meet our ambitious climate change goals. U.S. leadership will continue to be important, and that's why your continued efforts to push the boundaries of federal sustainability work will remain vital. Again, congratulations to this year's awardees. Thanks for inviting me to be here with you today, and I'll be happy to take a few questions.